In a world obsessed with likes and followers, the most powerful person is the one who doesn't need any of it. Why? Because the moment you stop chasing approval, you become impossible to control, and that terrifies people more than you think, ever. Wonder why certain people try to tear you down the moment you set boundaries. It's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because your strength reminds them of everything they've avoided in themselves. Today's society praises loud ambition and flashy success, but real power, it walks in silence, unsettles the room, and doesn't ask for permission. And those who rely on attention, they can't stand it. Welcome to StoicCraft, where timeless Stoic wisdom meets the modern world. We don't chase trends. We don't sugarcoat truth. Here we build inner strength, quiet confidence, and the kind of presence that commands respect without needing to say a word. If you're tired of noise, distraction, and false expectations, you're in the right place. There are people in this world who are quietly unsettled by your growth. Not because you've wronged them, not because you're arrogant or threatening, but because you are slowly, steadily realizing your own power. And they know that once you fully step into it, they can no longer manipulate or control you. You've probably felt this shift before. It happens the moment you begin to change, when you stop being compliant, when you finally start saying no to things that don't align with your values. Suddenly, the people who once celebrated your kindness now seem uncomfortable. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're no longer easy to control. You don't have to yell to show strength. True power doesn't announce itself. The moment you become calm, self-contained, and detached from the need for approval, you are already stronger than most. That quiet shift in your energy is enough to unsettle those who depend on your weakness. To feel in control, they sense it, often before you do, that you no longer need their validation, that you are becoming someone who can stand alone, grounded and unshaken, and that terrifies them. Out of that fear, they will try to confuse you. They'll whisper doubts into your path, that you're too much, too different, too distant, that maybe you should shrink a little, tone it down, blend in. But let's be clear, you are not the problem. Their discomfort is not your burden to carry. You don't owe them a softer version of yourself just to soothe their insecurity. You were never meant to fit inside the frame they built to contain you. And here's where the truth gets sharper. Your presence alone speaks louder than any words. There are two types of power in this world. The kind that demands attention through volume, noise, performance, and the kind that commands respect through stillness, certainty, and calm. The latter doesn't try to be seen. It can't help but be noticed. You've seen it before. A person walks into a room and everything shifts. No loud entrance, no forced smiles. Just presence, a gravity that changes the energy in the air. Conversations pause, eyes turn. It's not about what they say, but what they don't need to say. That's the power that unsettles people, the kind you're starting to grow into. Real power doesn't chase recognition. It doesn't ask for permission to exist. It doesn't rely on likes or approval ratings to feel valid. It simply is. And those who've spent their entire lives seeking attention or molding themselves to fit in can't help but feel threatened by someone who doesn't play that game. Your calm confidence, your refusal to conform, your quiet resistance to being shaped by others. It makes them nervous because they know they can't influence you the way they do with others, and so they'll test you. They'll poke holes in your confidence. They'll throw subtle jabs. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because they need to reassure themselves that you're not as solid as you seem. They want to see if they can provoke you, control you, break that stillness you carry. If you've ever felt someone change how they treat you after you became more grounded, this is why. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop asking for permission to take up space, when you stop playing the game of trying to be agreeable people, take notice. Some grow quiet, some lash out, some try to drag you back into the version of you that was easier for them to manage. But here's what you must remember. You've already changed. You've crossed a line in your evolution. There's no going back. Real power isn't about how loud you are, how much you prove, or how hard you push. It's about what you no longer feel the need to do. The greatest figures in history, the ones who carried true Stoic presence, weren't loud. They were immovable. They walked with purpose, not performance. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, didn't boast about his title. He didn't need to. He wrote to himself to stay humble, to stay focused, to remain unshaken by the praise or criticism of others. His strength came not from his empire, but from his ability to master himself. And that's the kind of power you're called to cultivate now. Every time you walk into a room, people aren't just listening to your words, they're reading your energy. They notice when you don't rush, when you don't fill silence with empty noise, when you respond with intention, not impulse, when you don't try to impress. That presence disrupts their expectations, and some people will test you just to see if they can shake it. They'll interrupt you mid-thought, dismiss your perspective, or joke at your expense, not to destroy you, but to test if your strength is real or just surface level. There are people who will try to make you feel small, not by force, but by subtle tactics. They'll say things just sharp enough to make you question yourself. They'll expect you to over-explain, to justify, to shrink. They want you to doubt your worth, to rely on their approval for your confidence. Why? Because if you start standing tall, if you stop reacting, if you no longer feed their ego with your insecurity, they lose their power. Without your energy, their empty dot, the way you carry yourself, sends a message long before you speak. If you move through the world hesitantly, if your body language says you're unsure, people will reflect that uncertainty back at you. But if you walk into a room with presence, if you hold your posture like someone who doesn't need permission to exist, others will respond to that signal. They will respect it even if they don't understand it. So pause and ask yourself honestly, how do you show up? Are you apologizing for your existence in subtle ways? Do you rush to fill silence with explanations? Do you feel the need to justify your decisions, your thoughts, your boundaries? Are you letting others decide how you think, how you feel, how you move? Or are you letting your stillness speak for you? Are you grounded enough to allow silence to exist without anxiety? Can you let others sit with their discomfort while you remain composed? This isn't about ego. It's not about domination. It's about self-ownership. It's about knowing who you are at such a deep level that the world is forced to adjust not the other way around. Because the truth is, real power isn't loud. It doesn't need to prove. It just is. The man who no longer seeks validation becomes untouchable. Not because he intimidates others, but because he operates from an internal compass. He's not waiting for someone else to say it's okay to be strong. When you stop chasing approval, when you stop reacting to every little challenge, when you stop asking permission to be who you already are, everything shifts. The people around you change. Some will admire your conviction. Some will feel threatened by it. Some will try to test your resolve. But none of them will be able to ignore you. So what's your next move? Stop over-explaining. Stop overthinking. Stop shrinking to accommodate spaces that were never built for your full height. Own your space. Walk with clarity. Let your presence speak the message. I am not here to impress. I am here to exist, because a man who does not ask for approval cannot be manipulated. And a man who cannot be manipulated is finally free. Take David, for example, a man who was told his dreams were foolish. He grew up in a place where creativity was dismissed, where painting and music were seen as hobbies for children, not careers. For men, everyone around him told him to get real, to settle, to be safe. For a while, he believed them. He questioned himself, as we all do when the crowd gets loud. But then David made a decision that changed everything. He stopped asking for permission. He stopped needing someone else to validate his dream. He chose to believe in his own voice even when no one else echoed it back. It wasn't easy. The path was steep. There were late nights, unpaid commissions, years of learning with no applause. But he kept going. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, didn't boast about his title. He didn't need to. He wrote to himself to stay humble, to stay focused, to remain unshaken by the praise or criticism of others. His strength came not from his empire, but from his ability to master himself. And that's the kind of power you're called to cultivate now. Every time you walk into a room, people aren't just listening to your words, they're reading your energy. They notice when you don't rush, when you don't fill silence with empty noise, when you respond with intention, not impulse, when you don't try to impress. That presence disrupts their expectations. And some people will test you just to see if they can shake it. They'll interrupt you mid-thought, dismiss your perspective, or joke at your expense. Not to destroy you, but to test if your strength is real or just surface level. There are people who will try to make you feel small, not by force, but by subtle tactics. They'll say things just sharp enough to make you question yourself. They'll expect you to over-explain, to justify, to shrink. They want you to doubt your worth, to rely on their approval for your confidence. Why? Because if you start standing tall, if you stop reacting, if you no longer feed their ego with your insecurity, they lose their power. Without your energy, their empty dot, the way you carry yourself, sends a message long before you speak. If you move through the world hesitantly, if your body language says you're unsure, people will reflect that uncertainty back at you. But if you walk into a room with presence, if you hold your posture like someone who doesn't need permission to exist, others will respond to that signal. They will respect it even if they don't understand it. So pause and ask yourself honestly, how do you show up? Are you apologizing for your existence in subtle ways? Do you rush to fill silence with explanations? Do you feel the need to justify? Your decisions, your thoughts, your boundaries? Are you letting others decide how you think, how you feel, how you move? Or are you letting your stillness speak for you? Are you grounded enough to allow silence to exist without anxiety? Can you let others sit with their discomfort while you remain composed? This isn't about ego. It's not about domination. It's about self-ownership. It's about knowing who you are at such a deep level that the world is forced to adjust not the other way around. Because the truth is, real power isn't loud. It doesn't need to prove. It just is. The man who no longer seeks validation becomes untouchable. Not because he intimidates others, but because he operates from an internal compass. He's not waiting for someone else to say it's okay to be strong. When you stop chasing approval, when you stop reacting to every little challenge, when you stop asking permission to be who you already are, everything shifts. The people around you change. Some will admire your conviction. Some will feel threatened by it. Some will try to test your resolve. But none of them will be able to ignore you. So what's your next move? Stop over-explaining. Stop overthinking. Stop shrinking to accommodate spaces that were never built for your full height. Own your space. Walk with clarity. Let your presence speak the message. I am not here to impress. I am here to exist, because a man who does not ask for approval cannot be manipulated. And a man who cannot be manipulated is finally free. Take David, for example, a man who was told his dreams were foolish. He grew up in a place where creativity was dismissed, where painting and music were seen as hobbies for children, not careers. For men, everyone around him told him to get real, to settle, to be safe. For a while, he believed them. He questioned himself, as we all do when the crowd gets loud. But then David made a decision that changed everything. He stopped asking for permission. He stopped needing someone else to validate his dream. He chose to believe in his own voice even when no one else echoed it back. It wasn't easy. The path was steep. There were late nights, unpaid commissions, years of learning with no applause. But he kept going. And something remarkable happened. The same people who doubted him, the ones who laughed or warned him, started to admire him. They suddenly wanted to know how he made it. Why? Because he did what they were too afraid to do. He chose himself. That's the power of someone who doesn't wait to be chosen. Now turn inward. Reflect. How many times have you hesitated because you feared what others would think? How many times have you stayed silent, not because you didn't have something to say, but because you were afraid of rejection? How often have you betrayed your own truth in the name of keeping peace? That ends now, because here's the harsh reality. If you need approval, you can be controlled. And if you can be controlled, you will never be free. Society has been programming you from childhood to seek rewards for compliance, to be acceptable, to fit into boxes, to choose what is realistic. They want you safe, small, predictable, because predictable people don't challenge systems. They follow them. That's why when you stop seeking validation, the people around you get nervous. They try to pull you back, not out of concern, but out of fear. Because when you become independent, you hold up a mirror to their own submission. When you step out of line, they're forced to face the possibility that they've wasted years living someone else's life. Look around you. How many men, do you know who've settled? Who wake up every day to a job they despise, stuck in relationships that drain them, living under expectations they never agreed to? They're not living, they're performing. And they need you to perform too, because if you stop, they have to face the truth that they didn't have to settle either. This is why your freedom makes people uncomfortable. Your self-belief challenges their excuses. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor, a philosopher, knew this well. He held the power of Rome, but never once allowed himself to be ruled by public opinion. His life was a practice in internal alignment. He didn't chase applause. He lived by principle. He didn't let the noise of the crowd dictate his course. True, power doesn't come from raising your voice. It comes from keeping your center when everything around you is trying to pull you off balance. The man who shouts may feel powerful in the moment, but deep down he knows shouting is the sound of lost control. Power doesn't need to be loud. Power doesn't flinch. Power moves slowly, deliberately, with clarity. And this kind of power, real, stoic, unshakable power, is something you can master. First, slow everything down. When emotions begin to rise, when someone tries to pull you into their storm, pause. Don't rush to reply. Don't scramble to defend yourself. Just breathe. Stillness is a weapon one most people are too anxious to wield. They're terrified of silence, desperate to fill it. Let them. While they scramble for control, you remain calm. That alone breaks their rhythm. Second, retrain your mind to see provocation for what it truly is, not a threat, but a test. When someone pushes your buttons, it's rarely about you. It's a projection of their insecurity, a weak man's attempt to drag you into his chaos so he can feel powerful for a moment. Don't give them that moment. Once you recognize the pattern, it loses its grip. Third, never let someone else's emotions dictate your own. Just because they panic doesn't mean you must. Just because they raise their voice doesn't mean you need to match their volume. Emotional discipline is the highest form of self-respect. When you can stay grounded, in your own centered calm, alert, detached, you control the entire dynamic. You own the tempo. You shift the power without even trying. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people will never master this. They'll live their whole lives as reactors, defending, explaining, proving, exhausting themselves in battles they didn't need to fight. They'll get pulled into arguments that go nowhere, triggered by words that hold no real power. They'll live like puppets dancing to strings they don't even realize are there, but not you. Not anymore, because the moment you understand that your reactions are your responsibility, that your emotions are yours to manage and not theirs to manipulate, that's the moment you become untouchable. So the next time someone tries to provoke, you remember, you don't owe them a reaction. You don't have to defend your dignity to anyone. Every time you remain still, you take your power back, and that silence you've learned to hold, that silence is their nightmare. Watch closely. Some people can't stand it. They squirm when things go quiet. They rush to speak, to accuse, to bait you into a response. They'll throw insults like darts, hoping one will stick. But when you just look at them, expressionless, unbothered, still, they fall apart. Because silence makes them face the one thing they've been running from all along, themselves. Silence is not passive. It's confrontational in its own way. It forces people to confront the emptiness of their noise. It shows them that their games don't work anymore. Think about a recent moment. Maybe it was a coworker trying to undermine you in a meeting, a relative pushing your buttons, or a stranger online attacking your beliefs. What they really wanted wasn't to be right. They wanted your reaction. They wanted your energy. They wanted to rattle you just enough so they could feel superior. But when you don't give it to them, something shifts. They laugh nervously. They play it cool. But inside they're scrambling. They were ready for a fight, and now they're swinging at shadows. This is the true essence of power. Composure, control, silence. That's why history remembers those who held their ground without flinching, the generals who didn't blink, the leaders who didn't explain, the warriors who didn't need to raise their voice to win. Marcus Aurelius could have crushed his critics with a word, but he chose restraint. He practiced calm because he knew the truth. To react to fools is to descend to their level. He mastered himself, and in doing so became immune to manipulation. Epictetus, once a slave, was insulted countless times, yet he remained unmoved. He understood that words are powerless unless we let them in. He refused to hand his dignity over to anyone, and no one could take it from him. Now look at your own life. How often have you felt pressured to explain yourself to people who never truly cared? How much energy have you spent defending your choices to those who were just waiting to tear them down? Let them talk. Let them project. Let them flood the space with their insecurities and desperate attempts to provoke. You owe them nothing, not your words, not your attention, not your reaction, because the moment you stop explaining yourself, you win. You step out of their frame. You break their pattern, and you make them face the one person they've been avoiding, themselves. And when you do that, when your silence holds a mirror to their chaos, they crumble. This is the strategy of power without aggression, control without confrontation. In negotiations, the man who speaks the least holds the upper hand. In conflict, the one who stays still dictates the rhythm. In life, the man who doesn't need to prove himself cannot be defeated, not because he fights harder, but because he no longer fights at all. The man who no longer seeks validation becomes the one who commands true respect. You see it everywhere, this addiction to being seen, being praised, being right. Some people are so desperate for validation that they chase conflict just to feel important. They argue, provoke, manipulate, not because they care about truth or resolution, but because they need your attention like oxygen. They want you to step into their chaos, to engage in their battles, because it gives them a fleeting sense of control. But here's the power move. Don't give them what they crave. No reaction, no justification, no defense, just silence. That doesn't mean you let people disrespect you. It doesn't mean you shrink or retreat. It means you've mastered the art of choosing your battles. Not every attack deserves a counter. Not every challenge requires your energy. Sometimes the most powerful statement is no statement at all. When you walk away with calm confidence, you force them to face themselves, and that's what terrifies them. Because without your energy, without your reaction, they are left with their own emptiness. They are exposed, stripped of the illusion that they had any power over you to begin with. A man who argues with fools becomes one. A man who wastes breath trying to explain himself to those unwilling to listen only drains himself. A man who reacts emotionally to every jab and insult hands over the keys to his peace. But a man who knows when to hold his tongue, when to let others tire themselves out, when to stand his ground without flinching, that man is untouchable. He becomes the kind of presence people can't shake, can't rattle, and can't control. So next time someone tries to pull you into their storm paws, don't play their game. Look them in the eye, smile if you want, and walk away, because your silence, that's their nightmare. Now let's talk about something deeper, the invisible game most men don't even realize they're playing. He thought success was about proving something, that if he could climb just high enough, gain just enough status, win just enough recognition, he'd finally feel worthy. So he played the game. He worked long hours, pushed harder than everyone else, bought the suit, the car, the social access. He shook the right hands, made the right connections, tried to become the man others would admire or envy. Every room he entered became a quiet battlefield of status. Who had more influence? Who looked more powerful? Who was more admired? And for a while he convinced himself this was it. This was success. This was how you won. But deep down, something was off. He could feel it when he forced himself to smile through conversations he didn't care about, with people he didn't respect. He felt it every time he spent money he didn't need to impress people who didn't matter. And most of all, he felt it when he looked at himself in the mirror and wondered, why do I still feel empty? Then one day, the truth hit him. This time, he wasn't chasing success, he was chasing validation. He wasn't building something real, he was trying to be seen. Every move, every sacrifice, every fake smile was just an attempt to feel like he mattered in a game he never even wanted to play. And when he finally stopped, when he asked himself, what am I actually chasing and why? Everything shifted. He stepped back. He stopped performing. He stopped caring whether people approved. He stopped running the race. Pursuit of more. You found something far greater, something they can't understand and may never possess. You found the power to walk away, the power to define your life on your own terms, the power to be free, because real success isn't measured by how loudly you win. It's measured by how peacefully you live, and sometimes your calm, grounded presence is exactly what unsettles others the most. See, some people won't dislike you because of something you did. They'll dislike you because of who you are, because your existence reminds them of what they're not. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to show off. Just by being disciplined, focused, and unwilling to shrink, you confront them with a truth they're not ready to face. Think of the coworker who mocks your dedication because deep down, your drive reveals his own laziness. Or the old friend who belittles your ambition because he abandoned his own dreams years ago. Or the family member who calls you lucky to avoid acknowledging the sacrifices you made that they weren't willing to make. These people aren't truly criticizing you. They're rejecting the reflection you cast back at them. A mirror of what they could have been if only they had chosen differently. It's a hidden rule of human nature. People project their disappointments. And when someone refuses to settle, when someone lives with intention and clarity, It disturbs the comfortable lies others have built their lives upon. Your growth becomes their trigger. Your strength exposes their excuses. Your refusal to conform reminds them that they weren't trapped, they were just scared. And nothing makes a person more uncomfortable than realizing they were their own greatest limitation. So what do? They mock, they minimize. They twist your confidence into arrogance, your focus into obsession, your self-assurance into self-importance. Because if they can paint you as the problem, they don't have to look in the mirror. Think back. When was the last time someone tried to subtly make you doubt yourself? Maybe it was a backhanded compliment. Maybe it was a dismissive laugh when you shared a goal. Maybe it was a moment of silence that said more than words ever could. These aren't isolated moments. They're signals. They tell you that your presence, without trying, is shaking something loose in others. And instead of rising to meet you, they try to pull you down. But here's what they don't know. You don't need their approval. You never did. Sometimes the attacks aren't obvious. They come in passive-aggressive jabs, dismissive comments, or subtle efforts to question your choices. But the underlying message is always the same. Stop being who you are. You're making me uncomfortable. But here's what they fail to grasp: their discomfort is not your burden. Their insecurities are not your responsibility. You are not here to shrink so that others can feel tall. You're not here to slow your pace so they don't feel left behind. You're not here to silence your voice just because it echoes the courage they never found. You're here for something far more powerful: to live fully, unapologetically, and authentically. And yes, that will make people uncomfortable. It will anger some. It will intimidate others. It may even inspire attacks from those who feel threatened. But that's not your concern, because their battle was never with you. It's with themselves. Once you truly understand this, everything changes. You stop explaining, you stop defending. You stop investing emotional energy into people who aren't seeking growth, just comfort. You start moving forward without needing to look back. And in doing so, you do the very thing they feared most. You prove their excuses were never real, that they could have chosen differently, that the only thing that ever held them back was fear. And that's why they resent you, not because of your success, but because of what it says about their failure. Not because of your discipline, but because it highlights their own neglect. Not because of your independence, but because they're still trapped in a cycle of needing permission to live. But here's the truth that changes everything. Some people will be inspired by you. They'll see your journey not as a threat, but as proof that change is possible. And those are the people who matter. So let the rest whisper. Let them gossip, project, and twist your story. Let them spin their tailies to protect the fragile illusion they live in. Don't need to fight them. You don't need to explain yourself. You just need to keep going, keep growing, keep living in such a bold and clear way that even your existence forces people to confront their own reflection. Because whether they choose to admire you or hate you, one thing is certain: they will never be able to ignore you. Respect lasts. Popularity fades. Let me tell you about a man I once worked for. He wasn't the most liked leader in the company. He never tried to be. He didn't bend to social pressure, didn't pander to emotions, and didn't sugarcoat the truth just to keep the peace. He stood for something. deeper dash principal dot when employees begged for special treatment. He declined dot when upper management demanded shortcuts for profit. He refused. When conflict arose, he didn't choose sides, he chose integrity dot at first. People grumbled dot, they called him cold, too rigid, too harsh. They said he didn't know how to play the game. But over time, those same people began to respect him. They saw that while he wasn't always what they wanted, he was exactly what they needed. They realized that his decisions, while tough, were fair, that his words, though sharp, were honest, that his leadership, though firm, was grounded dot. And when he finally left the company, no one remembered him for being friendly dot. No one praised his small talk or his charm. They remembered his integrity. They remembered that when he said something, he meant it. They remembered that he was a man they could trust, because popularity is fragile, but respect is lasting. Most people don't understand this. They chase being liked. They smile when they're hurting. They agree when they should disagree. They avoid difficult conversations just to fit in. And for what? A momentary sense of belonging? A shallow nod of approval? That's why so many feel lost, because in the effort to please everyone, they've forgotten who they are. But there is another path, a harder path. Yes, but one that leads to something real. You don't need to be liked, you need to be respected. And respect isn't given to those who blend in dot. It's given to those who stand up dot, to those who say what others won't dot, to those who make the right choice, even when it's the hard one. Look around. How many of the most respected people in history were universally liked during their lifetime? Marcus Aurelius didn't lead the Roman Empire by catering to the masses. He led with discipline, reason, and unshakable principle. He chose what was lasting over what was convenient. Epictetus once, a slave didn't seek popularity. He sought truth dot, and because of that, his wisdom outlived kings. The world will test you dot. It will try to break your values, soften your stance, and tempt you to trade principle for comfort. But if your goal is to live with strength, clarity, and truth, you can't afford to play that game, because the people who change the world are the ones who refuse to be changed by it dot. Now, ask yourself, when was the last time you stayed silent and someone panicked because they couldn't shake your calm? Drop your story in the comments. Your experience might be the mirror someone else needs to stop playing small and start owning their power. And if this message spoke to you, don't stop here. Head over to our playlist. It's filled with insights that will sharpen your mind, ground your emotions, and help you walk through life with unshakable presence.